My name is Jamon McKinney, or you can just call me Juice because that is my nickname. Let's discuss how the Cincinnati Bengals are going to fare during the 2020-21 NFL season. Now, I foretold in the offseason of last year that the Cincinnati Bengals would be the worst team in all of football in 2019. And that ended up being true. The Bengals were not very good last year, and ultimately, I was right, okay? But the good news is, while the Bengals were the worst team in football last year, I think they got a pretty good return for being the worst team in football based on what they got in the 2020 NFL Draft. They got their hands on Joe Burrow, who, to me, is one of the best quarterback prospects I've ever seen. He might be the best quarterback prospect to come out since Andrew Luck. And I think Joe Burrow has a chance to become an elite quarterback. I would not be shocked if Joe Burrow at some point in his career wins an NFL MVP. And I actually did an episode roughly about 2 months ago stating that I believe Joe Burrow is going to eventually win the Cincinnati Bengals a Super Bowl before he retires. I believe that he's going to change that franchise. And the thing that I like most about Joe Burrow is that, every quarterback is great when things are, on schedule, when you got a clean pocket, when you have protection. A lot of quarterbacks can look good. And while Joe Burrow looks better than even most quarterbacks with a clean pocket, what impresses me the most about Joe Burrow is that when things break down, that's when he's at his best. Off schedule, making plays outside the pocket, down the field, and turning nothing into something. Joe Burrow's poise really impressed me last year at LSU. He's deadly accurate. He's an excellent decision maker. He's got a great football IQ. And ultimately, I think that Joe Burrow is going to be a great quarterback in the NFL. Like I said, this guy has 60 touchdown passes to only 6 interceptions this past year, and he did that in the SEC, the best conference in all of college football. He shredded the best defenses. He won a Heisman Trophy, and he won a national championship. And this guy has NFL habits. He's not just this guy that puts up numbers in college football. No, not only did he have the greatest college football season ever, this guy has NFL habits. He's an NFL quarterback, and I believe he's going to turn this franchise around. Now, in order for Joe Burrow to accomplish winning the Bengals a Super Bowl, we have to find out this year if Zac Taylor is the head coach of the future. If Zac Taylor does not show progression as a head coach this year, I think you have to fire him. Because while it may not be fair to Zac Taylor, the windows for NFL teams close very fast. And the Bengals, they're on the clock right now as we speak, because recently we've seen Patrick Mahomes win a Super Bowl on his rookie contract. We saw Jared Goff get to a Super Bowl on his rookie contract. We saw the Philadelphia Eagles take advantage of Carson Wentz being on a rookie contract en route to winning a Super Bowl. We saw even a couple years ago, roughly 10 years ago, Aaron Rodgers won a Super Bowl on a rookie contract. The NFL salary cap is at an all-time high, and usually you only get a certain amount of opportunities to win a Super Bowl because there's not money to go around for everyone. And if Joe Burrow becomes as good as I think he can become, he's going to demand a lot of money, and it's going to be hard to build around Joe Burrow if he gets a big-time contract early in his career. If he makes it to a second contract, it's going to be very tough to consistently get good players around Joe Burrow through free agency and things of that nature. And listen, you don't have time to be figuring out if Zac Taylor is your head coach of the future and things of that nature, wasting years on Joe Burrow's contract. You cannot be wasting years on his contract. If you don't know if Zac Taylor is the future great head coach for the Bengals by the end of this season, guess what? That means he needs to be fired because you can't waste any time. I'm going to give Zac Taylor the benefit of the doubt simply because last year he had the worst team in all of football, and I predicted the Bengals were going to be the worst team in all of football last year, and that was the case. So Zac Taylor did not have a great team at his disposal. I want to at least give Zach Taylor the benefit of the doubt because now he's got a legit quarterback. Let's see what Zach Taylor does with Joe Burrow at quarterback this year. This is a former quarterback in Zach Taylor that played in the NFL briefly. He learned under Sean McVay, and I understand that he only won 2 games as a head coach last year. But like I said, let's see what he does with a legit quarterback. And 8 games last year were lost by 1 possession for the Bengals. That means they were actually competitive in some games. So I want to give Zach Taylor some credit for at least having this team competing in nearly half their games because, like I said, 8 games for the Bengals last year were lost by 1 possession. And usually, in those one-score games, if you have a great quarterback that can deliver you from evil, 9 times out of 10, you usually start to win most of those close games. So that's how I feel about Zach Taylor and Joe Burrow going forward. Now, there are some people out there that believe Joe Burrow is going to struggle as a rookie quarterback. And I will admit, this is not the ideal situation for Joe Burrow simply because he's inheriting the team that had the worst record in the NFL last season. But I honestly disagree with the premises and the overall thought that Joe Burrow is going to struggle this year. I think Joe Burrow is actually going to have a fairly solid rookie season. And honestly, I won't be shocked if Joe Burrow wins NFL Rookie of the Year. In fact, he's my pick to win Offensive Rookie of the Year this season. Joe Burrow obviously does not have the greatest offensive line at his disposal. However, last year Kyler Murray did not have the greatest offensive line at his disposal, and he won Rookie of the Year. I think Joe Burrow is just as good of a prospect, if not a better prospect, than one Kyler Murray. And let's keep in mind, this offensive line is not great, but they do get Jonah Williams back, who was their first-round pick from a year ago. So he's going to be fully healthy, so that should bolster up the offensive line. And I also believe Joe Burrow has a very good, well above average wide receiver core at his disposal. You look at A.J. Green. He comes back this year. A.J. Green's played the NFL for 8 total seasons. 6 of those 8 seasons, A.J. Green has gone over 1,000 yards. He's one of the best wide receivers in the NFL when healthy. The Cincinnati Bengals drafted T. Higgins out of Clemson, a 6'4" wide receiver who averaged 18.7 yards per catch last year. Tyler Boyd is one of the most underrated players in the entire NFL. Tyler Boyd is a very good young wide receiver that's 25 years old, and the last 2 seasons, he's gotten 1,000 yards. Tyler Boyd's a real player. Auden Tate showed some promise last year. And I know John Ross, up to this point, has been nothing short of a bust, but John Ross has some real talent. I still think there's some untapped potential with John Ross. Maybe Joe Burrow is the quarterback that can elevate John Ross, because John Ross, if he puts it all together, this is a guy that we're talking about that ran the 40-yard dash at the NFL Combine in 4.22 seconds. That is blazing fast speed. By the way, John Ross is goated in Madden. When you play with John Ross in Madden, you know, he's excellent, okay? Just putting that out there, okay? Also, keep in mind, the Cincinnati Bengals have Joe Mixon, who's arguably the most underrated running back in the entire NFL. The last 2 seasons, he's averaged well over 4 yards per carry. In 2018, he had 4.9 yards per carry, and this past year, he had 4.1 yards per carry. In 2018, he had 1,168 yards rushing. In 2019, which was this past year, he had 1,137 yards rushing. Joe Mixon continues to put up numbers and put up great statistics behind a very subpar offensive line. Joe Mixon is one of the best running backs in the entire NFL. It's just no one talks about him because he's on a losing team and playing behind a bad offensive line. And also, the Cincinnati Bengals defense should be at least somewhat improved. I'm not going to say this defense is going to be a dominant unit because I have some questions about the defense, but the Cincinnati Bengals went out and spent some money in free agency and got some key players to help out their defense. Mackenzie Alexander, Von Bell, who's 25 years old and still developing. DJ Reader, who had his best season as a pro, he's 26 years old at the defensive tackle position. Trey Waynes, who's inconsistent at times, but if you get the good Trey Waynes, that's a very quality defensive back. Sam Hubbard's a good player that I liked coming out of Ohio State a couple years ago. And Carlos Dunlap and Geno Atkins are two veteran defensive players that no one talks about that have been flying under the radar for years. So while the Bengals defense is not overall a very complete unit, you have some decent players on that side of the football. So I don't think the Bengals are going to be awful this year. I have them winning 5 games this year. Let me put it to you this way. If you win 5 to 6 or 7 games, more than likely, you're not a god-awful team. The Arizona Cardinals last year were not a god-awful team. They won 5 games. I consider the Cardinals a team on the rise. And I think by the end of next season, we will be saying the Cincinnati Bengals are on the rise. I think that Joe Burrow is going to have an excellent rookie season. He's surrounded by better players than what Kyler Murray was surrounded by last season. And Kyler Murray just won Rookie of the Year. And Joe Burrow might be a better player overall than Kyler Murray. I'd have to seriously consider how I feel about those two players, because I think Kyler Murray can be a top 5 quarterback. And I actually think Joe Burrow can be a top 5 quarterback as well. I think Kyler has higher upside than Joe Burrow. But either way you slice, I think that Joe Burrow is going to do what Kyler Murray did for the Arizona Cardinals last year. Kyler Murray provided juice to that franchise and gave that team hope. And that is why I think Joe Burrow is going to do for Cincinnati this year. Now, why are they only going to win 5 games? Well, let's think about it. Last year, this team only won 2 games. They were picking number 1 overall in the draft for a reason. They weren't a good team last year. And this team is still about 2 to 3 seasons away from being a serious contender. But I do think the Cincinnati Bengals are going to be on the rise by the end of the season. And also keep in mind, this division is very tough. Baltimore is much more better than Cincinnati at the moment. I think Cleveland is much more talented. I think Pittsburgh is much more talented. So this is a real division they are in. They're going to struggle at times. This team is not going to win a bunch of games, but I have them at 5. I think this team can score some points. I think they will improve by 3 games this year. I think they will at least double their win total. And I think that the Bengals are heading in the right direction. I think that at times, this team is going to be overwhelmed by teams with very good defensive fronts, because this offensive line outside of Jonah Williams is definitely a work in progress, and this defense overall is not great. And I think Joe Burrow at times will look like he's overwhelmed. Joe Burrow is going to flash a lot, but he's also going to make some mistakes. So Cincinnati fans, be patient. This is not an indictment on your team and on your future. It's just at this moment, the Bengals are about a 5-win team. They're about a 4 to 5-win team. I'm going with 5 because I believe in Joe Burrow, and I think that he's going to turn this franchise around, but it won't be in year number 1. Okay, so I have the Bengals at 5 wins this upcoming season in 2020-21. Let's go over their schedule a little bit right here. I'm not officially picking these games. I'm not gonna tell you who officially wins these games. I'm just gonna kind of give you a gauge on how I feel about each opponent and things of that nature. So week number 1 versus the Chargers, I actually think that's a toss-up game. I think that Joe Burrow can expose that Chargers defense just a little bit. I'm not completely sold on Tyrod Taylor. I do think the Chargers have a much better roster than Cincinnati, but I could see Joe Burrow shocking the world and winning that game. At Cleveland, at Philadelphia, back-to-back losses probably. Cleveland and Philadelphia are just much better teams than Cincinnati at the moment. Jaguars are home. That's the one game I really feel good about as far as Cincinnati winning. As far as the first 4 games of the season, you probably will beat Jacksonville. I favor you to beat Jacksonville. At Baltimore, not even close. Baltimore will win that game. At Indy, I favor the Colts. They have a much better roster, a much better coaching staff at the moment. Bengals at home in week number 7. That's a toss-up game. The Bengals actually did find a way to beat Cleveland once last year, so I could see the Bengals splitting with the Browns, but I'm not so sure. I probably favor Cleveland. Tennessee at home, I favor the Titans. They just went to the AFC Championship game last year. We'll see about that matchup, but I think that's probably a toss-up, only because Cincinnati is at home. Bye week at Pittsburgh. I think you actually can get a win at Pittsburgh. I'd probably say Cincinnati splits with Pittsburgh this year. I'm not sold on Pittsburgh. I don't think they're all that great of a team. So I'll say Cincinnati splits with Pittsburgh. At Washington, Washington is probably going to beat Cincinnati. That defensive front is going to eat that offensive line alive. Chase Young is going to make life hard for Joe Burrow, along with Montez Sweat, along with Matthew Ioannidis, along with Durant Payne and Jonathan Allen. I think Dwayne Haskins can expose that defense. So at Washington is probably a loss. I favor Washington. I think Washington's underrated. New York Giants at home. That's probably going to be a win. I just don't believe in the Giants this year. I think Joe Burrow projects to be a better quarterback than Daniel Jones. Despite me liking what I saw from Daniel Jones last year, I would probably take Joe Burrow over Daniel Jones. And that's a home game. At Dolphins, that's probably going to be a toss-up game. I don't know who's going to win that matchup quite yet, so I'll put it in the toss-up category. Cowboys, I think that's probably a loss. I'm not completely sold on Dallas this year, but they have a much better roster than Cincinnati. Steelers at home, like I said, you're going to split with Pittsburgh this year. At Texans, that's an interesting game because we've seen Deshaun Watson and Bill O'Brien lay some eggs over the last couple of years, when they are playing down the competition. Houston's very talented, but they're a roller coaster. So I won't be shocked if Cincinnati surprises Houston, but I favor Houston to win that game in Week 17 versus the Ravens. Unless Lamar Jackson and the Ravens have clinched a playoff spot and they're resting their starters, I don't give Cincinnati much of a chance to beat Lamar Jackson and the Ravens because, honestly, the Baltimore Ravens might have the best roster in the entire NFL. So, there you have it right there. I think the Bengals are going to be fun and exciting to watch this upcoming season. Will they be great? No, they won't. Will there be some growing pains for Joe Burrow? Absolutely. However, I do believe the Cincinnati Bengals are going to be a 5-win team in 2020-21. And I do think that Joe Burrow eventually will turn that franchise around. And starting this year, Joe Burrow will provide juice to the Cincinnati Bengals franchise, and he will give them hope going forward. Thank you so much for watching this video today. Please also note that the Juice Alert Sports Podcast is not just a YouTube channel. It is available on all podcasting platforms, including Spotify, Google Podcasts, iTunes, and Apple Podcasts. Also, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share this content with all your friends. This podcast is my favorite thing in the entire world right now. It is my passion. And I want more people to listen to this podcast. I really want this podcast to grow. Also, a fun fact about me is that I want to go into the sports broadcasting and media world once I graduate from the University of Toledo, a college in Northern Ohio. I currently am a freshman there right now. I am looking to become one of the next great sports broadcasters and analysts out in the world. And I potentially would like to start my own network if this podcast really truly grows. Or if I fall short of that goal, I would love to work for a big-time network like ESPN or Fox Sports 1. I am open to all networks. So if you believe in my dreams and you see or hear my passion through the screen, be sure to tell all your friends about the Juice Alert Sports Podcast. Stay motivated, you guys. Have a God bless day, and I'm out.